Hello everybody, Earth.Otherwise here to continue our journey into game programming in C++, start to finish by Eric Yazwa. In this post, we're going to look at an online resource for code that you can use instead of writing out 500 lines of code solely for the purpose of using PNG files in your games. The OpenGL Wiki has a section for image libraries. In Load PNG, you'll find Pico PNG. Opening it, you'll find the text that we'll be copying into a CPP file. This here. Go into your program, and we're going to need a new class. We're going to call this class Pico capitals Pico PNG, and we're going to get rid of all of the actual class stuff. And now we're going to put everything in namespace otherwise, or of course your game engine's name. And now we're going to Control A, Control C, and then Control V. Now, a lot of this needs to get moved around. So, move this control vector up to here. Put a little space there. This is licensing and stuff. Leave that. Now we scroll down to the bottom where there is this, which is a little example program. Don't need that. Let's get rid of this part as well, because that's part of the example program. There we go. And everything should be fine. There we are. Now, this part here, we're going to need to copy this. Get rid of this because default parameters are declared here, and extern is the keyword that says, hey, this is defined over here. This is defined somewhere else, so go look for the definition somewhere else, just so that we don't get errors that say this has already been defined. Now, if we go back into BMP loader here, this little PNG decoder thing pretty much replaces everything up here. It replaces this part. It does not replace this part, which is the OpenGL creation of the texture. So, I wonder if we can rename this to image load.h. Yep, and I'm going to rename this to image load.cpp. And I'm going to change this to image load. So I'm going to have a BMP loader, but I'm gonna rename this as well, just because load BMP and GLU int load PNG, and then don't need that to say BMP file path, just needed to say file path. There we are. And then we're going to want to change things over here. Load BMP. And change that to file path. File path with a lowercase f, because we're using camel case for this instance. Copy this. paste it here, change BMP to PNG, create the second curly bracket. We're going to want to add include picopng.h. And now I made a little lie. Decode PNG doesn't actually replace all of this. It doesn't actually do any of the things here. Essentially, it just creates this data here that we use to put in here. Okay, so this section originally had me taking this section of code and creating a completely separate function for it, a function called create OpenGL texture. That is a mistake because this here, RGBA, and it's changed here. I forget what it was, but you probably still had, I think it's like BGR, maybe. But essentially, bitmaps and PNGs have two separate file formats, like the blue, green, and red and stuff is stored differently. So this section here, just copy it down here once you're done with this, once we throw the error and stuff, and put and pixel data 0 into this section where data would be here, and it is RGBA in both of these columns, so that this works, which should get rid of a bug where if you put this in the wrong, it displays something completely different that isn't your picture. Correction, this first one here is RGB, not BGR. The second one is BGR. After a bit of running around, oh yes, make sure this is file path. There we are. That's working. So, in here, we need to do a couple of things. We need unsigned long with height. And we need to load our code. std ifstream file path std iOS binary. So we're going to be loading the binary data from our PNG file. If file.fail, that means file did not load. We're going to want to throw error a PNG file PNG plus file path plus file could not be opened. There we go. So if our PNG file can't be read by the if stream, then we're going to throw an error. We may not want to do this in an actual game, since it would mean that the game literally just doesn't run if any of our image files don't work. Instead, here we may want to toss in a default file that's somewhere else in our file structure. That way, if somebody accidentally deletes a image or two, the game can still run. So, oh yeah, by the way, all of this, at least the PNG stuff, is is also taught on Making Games with Ben. So if you need a second opinion, just pop over there. It is discussed in Advanced Graphics Tutorials 12, in case you needed to know that. Next up, we are going to file.seekg 0 std iOS end, and then unsigned int file size is equal to file.telg. This will just put the cursor at the end of the file and then tell us how many bits there are between the beginning of the file and the end of the file. And now std vector of chars called image data. Actually, between those two things, there is file size minus equal file.telg. And actually, before that, there is a file.seekg 0 std iOS beg the beginning. So what this does is it goes to the end, it sets that as the file size, and then it goes to the beginning and it minuses the beginning, which will be after the header from the file size. So essentially this gets the file size without the header in 4 lines, whereas up here we had to exactly know we had to know how big the header was, and yeah. Oh, S in size is capitalized. And then image data. We create our vector image data. And then image data dot resize file size. That way it's big enough. File dot read a reference to image data 0 file size. So read in all the data. Oh, this needs to be in brackets as well. There we are. And that bracket is not supposed to be there. There we are. std vector of unsigned chars, calling this temp image data, and std a vector of unsigned chars, which is the actual pixel data. So we've read all the data in binary into image data. Now we need to do something else. So temp image data dot resize file size so that our temp image data is the correct size, and then we need to size underscore t, I is equal to 0, I is less than file size, I plus plus, and then we want to make our temp image data I equal to image data I. Finally, we're going to int error code is equal to decode PNG. Okay. Decode PNG takes first picture. Then it takes width. Then it takes height. Then it takes a reference to our temp image data, the first instance of it, and it takes the size temp image data dot size. Oh wait, instead of picture I used pixels in this instance. Where is that? Pixel data. Control C, Control V. There we are. Okay, so let me explain what we just did here. So we need a vector of regular chars in order to do this file.read. However, decode PNG takes unsigned chars. So we create this vector of unsigned chars so that we can put our image data into it. And we take our pixel, and our pixel data here is the output. So this is the binary data. And this is the the data that was translated by decode PNG here. So pixel data is our actual pixel. Temp image data is our binary representation of that data. I don't know what would happen if you were to try to just turn this, the temporary image data, the binary, into a picture. It would probably be something completely insane. That might be something I try later. Anyways, now we just check if that worked. If error code is not equal to 0, meaning if literally anything happened, throw error. And now we're going to throw a pico PNG error. And it's going to say pico PNG. Oh no. Let's just say rather than pico PNG, let's say PNG decoder error. Because that's what we're doing. We're translating a PNG into a picture. PNG decoder through error, and then plus std to string, just so we can translate it, error code. So that will give us a number, which we can look up in on the wiki, or just Google it like I usually do. And now we want to return create OpenGL texture, width, height, and picture 0. Oh, not picture, pixel data. In my test programming, I called it picture. So that should allow us to use PNGs. Now we just need to do a little bit of changing work to our square here, because we don't have this otherwise BMP loader. It's load BMP. Now we don't have a BMP loader class anymore. We have image load BMP. There we are. Okay, so I'm just going to copy all of this because it's a little bit easier. Or perhaps not. Because essentially we're only going to change two things. We're only going to change... Here it is. We're only going to change this from load BMP to load PNG, and this needs to change a little bit. So I'm wondering about the order of this, because this is a static constant and whatnot, but let's just change this completely over to PNG. We will just hide this portion, and we'll call this bitmap UV coordinates. And I'll show you what we're actually going to do with that later. Load PNG. So, a bitmap is an uncompressed format. PNG is a compressed format. They store their pixels in complete opposite directions. So if you were to use these UVs, it would be upside down. So we're actually going to use upside down UVs. So essentially just reverse everything. 1.0f. 1.0f, 1.0f, 0.0f, 0.0f, 1.0f for the third line, and then 1.0f, 0.0f. That's fourth line. Fifth line is 0, 0. And final line is 0.0f and 1.0f. Okay. That's all well and good. So, here are my two separate files for my tutorials. So here we have 2, which is our BMP image. And here is 2 and Apple, a PNG image I found on the internet. You can find any PNG image you want. Literally just search for a PNG image and, just copy it into your textures folder in your thing. So, here we are. So, that's pretty much everything. We just need to pop into main and change this. Just change it to whatever your thing is called. Apple. And it's .png. Now this should work. It's not going to, but it should. We obviously made a mistake somewhere. I mean, when don't we? Really, I'm more afraid and confused when there isn't an error. See, lots of errors. That's great. Because if you assume you're perfect, then bad things happen. Let's get this out of the way. Let's check the output. Okay, so there's a syntax error in square. Expected there's a period here instead of a comma. And there's supposed to be a comma here. Okay, so those weren't frivolous errors. Those were typos. Try it again. Cannot open file otherwise.lib. Normally that would be concerning, but we have other errors to deal with. Vector is not a member of STD. What? That's because I don't have vector here. I should take it from in here and place it here. There we are. What other errors do we have? Vector, type, unsigned char, unexpected. Oh, that's just because the vector wasn't there. Rebuild! 2 successes. Okay, now let's... Oh, wait, I almost forgot. Turn off square, which is our triangle. Because, fuck you, that's why. Now let's see how this goes. And there we have it. An apple. The transparency. Yes, the transparency layer isn't being translated correctly. Otherwise, this would be blue and we wouldn't see this disgusting artifacting. But there we have the image. I think we handle transparency later. Anyways, that is how you handle PNG images. Next up, MIP mapping, and maybe we'll handle this transparency bug. Anyways, this has been Earth Otherwise. Thank you for watching.